No one takes responsibility of controlling those pass-through costs. That is evidence from our audit. And it is passed to the consumers as it comes. The charges are approved by an Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, and the consumer are greatly affected by the amounts that are approved for passing over to them. In addition, we have the National Treasury and the Ministry of Energy that are sometimes involved in the coming up with the subsidies, like we had recently. The two also play a key role in the negotiation of the IPPs. And the negotiation of IPP is coming up with admission of the new IPPs into the grid. Admission of the IPPs into the grid, to the national grid, and also on agreeing on the tariffs that are ultimately approved by IPRA. In the initial phase, the tariffs for thermal generation of power was initially based on what was a competitive procurement, where those who were to construct the generation farms, the power generating farms, they would be procured through a tendering process, and they would give their prices, and the prices would be agreed upon upfront, and that's what they would change, and any evaluations. Later on, this has changed to what is now in place, that is the feed-in tariffs, where the Ministry of Energy has the feed-in tariff policy that is applied in determining the price. Again, the policy is developed by the Ministry of Energy. Honorable members, Honorable Chair and Honorable members, the pricing of electricity includes levies and taxes by public agencies. EPRA charges a levy of 3 cents per kilowatt hour. WARMA charges a levy of 0.05 cents per kilowatt hour of hydro power generated. Rural electrification project levy has been set at 5% of the cost of units consumed. And we have the value added tax at 16% of the power consumed, and fuel cost adjustment and foreign exchange adjustments that are added onto the bill. Honorable members, Honorable Chair and Honorable members, at the time of the audit for the financial year 30th June 2022, there were a total of 25 different IPPs, not IPPs, but power purchase agreement between Kenya Power, the distribution company, and the IPPs. And the contracted, each power purchase agreement has a different price rating. And they range from 130 shillings per kilowatt hour to 5 shillings and 31 cents. We found that disparity to be quite wide. And the rates were different even where we had generators using the same resources and possibly at the same place. The justification of the difference, being that we could not really get it, and we felt that it may have been leading to the high cost of electricity, because if one can charge 130 shillings and another one can charge 5 shillings, and all of them are feeding to the consumer, then there's an issue to be addressed. Honorable Chair, honorable members, We have the state-owned entities that are in the electricity supply chain, and this is the Kenya Power, Kenya Electricity Generating Company, that is KENGEN. We have Rural Electricity and Renewable Energy Corporation. We have Kenya Electricity Transmission Company, KETRACO, and Geothermal Development Company Limited. And all of them are subject of the Auditor General in accordance with Article 2294, 2296, and Section 35 of the Public Audit Act. In the previous year, we noted that one of the key items that was making the power cost to increase was something we call the capacity charges. This is because the energy distribution company entered into agreement to purchase electricity from the independent power producers. And in the agreement, we have an amount that is payable based on the expected minimum power generated. Even if that minimum power threshold is not achieved, the distribution company will pay that standard amount, and that is the capacity charge. When we examine that further, we realize that the capacity charge actually formed a substantive proportion of the cost of electricity that is being passed to the consumer. And looking at the cost of power for the independent power producers, the total payments for cost of power in the financial year 2020-21 was 56 billion. And out of that, 47 billion was the capacity charge, which made 84%. In 2021-2022, the total was again 56 billion, and 49 billion was the capacity charge. And the capacity charge was 87%. Worth noting that the proportion of power paid to the independent power producers formed 56% of the total power purchased by the distribution company in year 2020-2021, and 59% in the year 2021-2022. But again, out of that, 44% of the power consumed is the only quantity that was purchased from the independent power producers. Worth noting that the state-owned power producer...
Request you to repeat that statement.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I was talking about the total power purchased in the year 2021-2022 and 2020-2021. The total power purchased in year 2021-2022 was 95 billion 176 million. And the one purchased in 2020-2021 was 101 billion 502 million. Out of that, in 2020-2021, 56% of the payments made were to independent power producers, excluding the state-owned power producer, that is KENGEN. 56%. And in the financial year 2021-2022, 59% was paid to the independent power producers. Whereas the state-owned power producer was only paid 44% in 2020-2021 and 41% in 2021-2022. However, the power supplied by the state-owned power producer, that is Kengen, was 70%, while the independent power producers produced 30%. And in 2021-2022, the state-owned power producer produced 63% against a payment of 41% of the total procurement, and the independent power producers produced 37% against the payment of 59% of the total paid. Our opinion knows that the state-owned power was a little cheaper compared. The factors for that, one of them is, as I had highlighted earlier, about the capacity charges. The other observation during the audit was about the system, the power losses. We looked at the 3 years, 2020.
Maybe that statement you've made.
Yes.
Because it is answered, is it cheaper or a little cheaper? Because, you know, you said the figures don't show a little.
Let's say cheaper. Yes, thank you, Chair. Good. Systems losses is the other item that increased the power cost. We will reviewed the system losses for during the distribution of power to the consumers. First of all, I need to highlight that EPRA sets the minimum or the acceptable level of power losses. And for the 3 years, the approved efficiency losses was 19.9% in 2020, 19.9% in 2021, and 19.9% in 2022. So overall, it is 19.9 across the board. However, the distribution company had power losses of 23.47 in 2019-2020, 23.95% in 2020-2021, and 22.4% in 2021-2022. That basically means that the power bills that have been given to customers or to consumers, roughly 20% does not represent a consumption by the consumers. These are system inefficiencies, whatever they are, and if they are contained, we strongly believe that could end up reducing the cost of electricity. Honorable Chair, honorable members, the Office of the Auditor General has also undertaken a few focused audits in form of forensic audit and special audit.
Maybe members, since the presenter has already exceeded the time by 6 minutes, but I think the content is very important. So we can give you another 5 minutes to summarize. I think you've done most of what we'll also do in the other, yeah. Okay. So there's a proposal that you are the man of the year. So you're given a bit more time to continue.
Maybe, thank you, Chair. Thank you, honorable members. Another 5 to 10 minutes I'll be through.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll try to summarize as much as possible. Honorable Chair, honorable members, the Office of the Auditor General has also undertaken a few focused audits And these are for forensic audits and a special audit on the distribution company. What the noting is that the forensic audits, 3 of them have already been presented to Parliament, and the 4th one is still is at the finalization stage and will be available. And we are saying that what we found is that the 4 forensic audits that have been undertaken, one is on the procurement and management of the power purchase agreement. The other one is on the use of heavy fuel oils by IPPs for power generation, review of system losses, and the third one is review of the supply chain function at Kenya Power. And I'll read the findings, not in any order, but the first one is that because of the distinct power purchase agreement, there were instances of unequitable treatment of power producers, thereby exposing the consumer, because those who charge highly, then charges will be transferred to the consumers directly. Then we have the power purchase agreement using the same resources for generation and located at the same place had different pricing. Then there was a finding that the power purchase agreements had been drawn based on a low demand scenario of least cost power development, whereas it should have been the reverse of that. This was said to have increased the prices that were used. There was no accounting for energy losses.
You could explain that statement further.
The statement of the use of the least cost power development plan. That one I would call on Ihothia from Kenya Power to probably elaborate on all of us, because it is clear that the way the agreements were done looked at the least power consumption that we can have instead of the maximum that we can have.
Oh, I understand what you mean.
And that made the energy, the tariffs to be higher than they should be. But I think I'll call on the distributor to explain that further when the time comes. Then we are saying that there is a little bit of accounting for losses, but there lacked what we would call monitoring meters in some of the critical transmission lines, looking at the power from the evacuation point up to the point of delivery and distribution. And the loss on some of those lines could not be accounted for, which exposes the consumer, because if those losses are accounted for, maybe the transmission company could bear some of those losses and not be loaded onto the consumers directly. There is the formula that is being used to date has not been updated. The formula for computation of the losses had needed to be relooked at in order for the realistic one to be used. There were weaknesses that were identified by the audits at various generation stations where the check meters were faulty. And with the check meter being faulty, then means that even what is billed to the distributor may not have been fully verified. The other one is the issue of the use of heavy fuel oils. As per the agreements, the heavy fuel oils have what we call a fuel supply agreement, which requires the distribution company to be part of the procurement process. However, the finding is that the purchase of the heavy fuel oils is not being adequately supervised. And in some instances, the generators are procuring those heavy fuels at very high prices because they do it like in a just on time basis. You know, so and we are of the opinion that if we could have the participation or the monitoring, so that we can control the cost of the prices of the heavy fuel oils being used. Then we have the Turkana Weed Power, where we are saying that the distribution company entered into a purchase agreement with a very highly exposed clause of paying for deemed energy supply. This is even if the generator generated the fuel, the energy, and it is not evacuated into the grid, then the company will still need to pay for it. Again, those costs will still be passed to the consumer in one way or the other. And then there are clauses that made the distributor to bear the VAT on behalf of the developer. Lastly, there is the issue of the investors are actually overprotected and overcovered by the system, because the National Treasury provides what we call the letter of support, and in some cases, on top of that, they produce letters of guarantees or letters of credit, which are supposed to cover the risks of the investor. And all those costs are loaded onto the consumer's prices. Thank you.
You know, if it was somewhere else, I would have given you a standing ovation. Or co-opted you to be a member of the Energy Committee. Because you know your data is not politics. It is the data that you have, and confirms a lot of the fears that we've been having. I think nobody else would have put it better than you have put it. I am particularly very happy about your presentation. It brings out the glaring and scary facts about what is happening. And I can tell you, you are right on point. Those are the same fears we've been having as a committee and also as Kenyans. So I would really ask the other presenters to follow the footsteps of the Auditor General in your presentations. Maybe before we proceed, we have members who've just joined us. I want you to introduce yourselves.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Simon Nganga Kengara, Member of Parliament for Ruiru Kiambu County, and also a member of this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Right.
Tom Udege is my name, MP Nyatike, and a member of the committee.
All right. So, because I know Treasury will not have such comprehensive presentation, and the way we have grouped the presentations is such that those of you providing us with information, and there's the other team that really, like I said, we believe have something to say about the problem because we are trying to engage because we believe the way our institutions are working, they should be able to do something to correct these things. So your presentation and that of the Treasury are a bit different, and I want to ask the Treasury to make a brief presentation, very brief. Then I will allow members to ventilate a little on that before now we go to the other presenters. So how many minutes do you want to do your presentation? 3 minutes. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman and honorable members. My name is Humphrey Mohu from the National Treasury. First, I would like to pass the apologies of the PS who was not able to come for this meeting. And also to say that I do not have a written presentation in line with what has been, a question which has been raised. I understand this.
However, as you make your presentation, we still need a written submission.
Yes.
Because we can't, for the purposes of our report, would require that.
Yes,
So you can make your remarks, and then those remarks also need to be in form of a document.
Yes, actually, I was going there because I want to say that we are going to present the detailed report on these issues, on these questions, maybe by Monday. Because I noticed somewhere only that maybe the PS is away. He was not able to give me the document to come with it. And also happened not to have been the one who was involved in the compilation. But just to say, Chairman, that just general comments about this process. The conceptualization of these IPPs or any other project that come from state agencies is done by the state agencies themselves. In this case, it's Kenya Power, Kenya, and so on and so forth. And then in line with the line ministries. So the conceptualization of those projects are done not by the Treasury, but by the state agencies and the line ministries. It is at the point whereby those projects would require the National Treasury support, that they make a formal request to us, indicating to us the kind of support they would like to have. So in the case of these IPPs, I know they would require letters of comfort or guarantees and so on. So in that case, they will write to the Treasury. Now, when these projects are given to us, we conduct some independent appraisals of these projects. We do financial appraisals of these projects. We also conduct economic appraisals of these projects, see, the kind of support they will give to the economy, and we, of course, we also undertake what we call risk analysis of these projects. This, of course, will help us in determining the level of support that will be required to provide as a National Treasury. If we are satisfied that these projects have got a positive contribution to the economy in terms of employment creation, in terms of stimulating the economy, and so stimulating the economy, in that case, we are able to give the letter of support or whatever guarantees or what they call the credit enhancement tools that the lenders would require. Then we will be able to provide that. Once the Treasury has given the guarantees, the letter of support, we write back to the ministry and, of course, to the state corporations, and then our role ends there. We do not, again, get involved in whatever happens after that. So, basically, Chairman, that is basically the general overview of the process.
What are you exactly supporting when you are issuing the letters of support? Because these institutions have an agreement with Kenya Power. Like the Office of the Auditor General said, is it not overprotecting them? Because basically what are the content of this letter of support says that if what happens, then what happens?
Chairman, I would like to go there because I don't have that detailed brief to say exactly what is in the letters of support. And from where I sit, I'm not involved in the preparation of that. But I believe the statement which you'll give to this committee will be able to give all those details.
All right. I will only excuse you because there was a last-minute change on who was supposed to appear here.
Yeah.
But we need that detail. We need to understand.
Yeah.
So what responsibilities are being loaded to Kenyans if, for instance, Kenya Power fails? Because from where I sit, that letter can only be given some certain guarantees that if something was to happen with Kenya Power, then you people now come in to take that responsibility. And I would want to understand why would, in the first place, why would want to do that? Because Kenya Power is generally a company like any other. So I run a small company that does ICT and engineering stuff. So can I come and you give me such guarantees?
Okay, I hear you.
Because I also borrow from people, for those small monies. But the question is, don't you think maybe we are probably overprotecting? And from where you sit, if I listen to you carefully, then it is not a bother of the Treasury to understand the content as long as it's been approved by the sagas. So they come for letter of support, you give them letter of support, because the detail is with the sagas within the ministries. That's probably why then the Office of the Auditor General has already pointed out that there are clear discrepancies in the signing of the PPS. The tariffs are different. Because you have no role, they just come, you just support as they are. You may need to have that document you're bringing to us being a bit more comprehensive to provide us with all those details.
Okay.
And if we can't get everything that we need from the document you are going to submit to us, then we will request you to appear again with the PS at a date to be scheduled later, so that you can give us more detailed information on this particular issue.
Chairman, I will be able to give detailed information about the criteria and so on that are used by the Treasury in determining even the nature of the letter of support that are given out.
Okay.
That will come out in the detailed
All
report.
right.
Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
answers.
So,
Thank you.
members, you've had the Treasury, you've had the Auditor General. Now, there are obviously many issues that are coming out very clear with the presentation by the Auditor General. Is like more or less the report is out there. So I want to ask you to ventilate a little on this particular matter. Then we can proceed to the next presentations. There is one more member who has joined us. Please proceed to introduce yourself.
Sorry for coming late. My name is Commander Mwafrika, Member of Parliament for Isambu, Nairobi County, a member of this committee.
Chair.
All right, let's start with Mheshimiwa Elisha.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've listened to the Auditor General of the Treasury. My question to the Auditor General, what would it cost the country if we nullify all the contracts? Number two, are the IPP, of course you mentioned, are they skewed? And how much are we paying in dollars? And that how much would we save if we decided to do the contracts on Kenya shillings? I think you mentioned candidly in terms of the companies that are earning a lot more on capacity charge, is it possible that you can profile them sequentially, starting with one that has earned much more than the others, to give us a pointer for further investigation? Finally, I still think that we have a problem between Auditor General and Treasury. As a parliament, in 12 parliament recommended the investigation on Turkana wind power. Treasury used their influence then, using Article 223, to pay billions for money that should not have been paid. Who is going to be held responsible for the 12 billion that was paid for deemed energy that was non-existent? Because as parliament, we went to Turkana. They were not ready. Why would they charge the country for deemed energy when they were not ready? And Treasury is a culprit on that payment. Who is going to be held accountable? Because that's part of the problem, because this money was paid through Kenya Power by authorization from Treasury. Thank you.
We have Mheshimiwa Kengara.
Thank you, Chair. May I also thank the contributor whom I found talking, because actually what we have heard, some of us have never heard of that. But my question is brief. Since now this is audit, so the question is to the Auditor General. We are suffering because of capacity charge. My question is, in other cities, we were told we have about between 20 and 22 IPPs in the country. That's what I have heard. I stand guided. And now that you did audit and you have even given percentages of what they contribute to the exchequer matters energy, what is the adequate IPPs we need within the 20s? Do we need all the 20s, or can we have less than 20 and progress? Thank you, Chair.
All right. So, yes,
Thank you, Chair. Just to add on what my colleague Honorable Elisha said about Lake Turkana wind power. I'm reading your report, and at page 9, bullet L, you have said that the forensic audit you carried out on Lake Turkana Wind Power Limited, and you came out there are 3 anomalies. My question is, looking at this, because this is where the problem could be, perhaps, because you are saying that this could be one of the causes that bring about the increased cost of power. Have you, because to me, with the background of my education, I believe this is just not forensic, but this could lead into maybe prosecution of individuals. Have you ever made any recommendation to ensure that the people who are involved in Lake Turkana wind power are prosecuted in court? Because this is a criminal. Thank you.
Maybe one more relating to the same Lake Turkana. Mr. Auditor General, I think, like I said, your presentation is very good, and confirms some of the greatest fears we've been having. And one of the projects is that Lake Turkana wind project, which has 2 elements. You mentioned the deemed energy, which one was to the extent that there was a claim that the transmission line delayed construction, and by that time they should have been selling power to us. So then we are charged as a country because the supplier says they were ready to supply, but we were not ready to evacuate the power because the transmission lines were not ready by then. So this committee, which now I'm serving in my third term, so at least I've had an opportunity to see the progress of that line since it was started to the end. Now, when the claim was made that we were supposed to pay Lake Turkana, we took initiative as a committee to visit Lake Turkana Wind to establish whether the claim was true that they were indeed ready when the lines were not ready. What we established was that they were not ready to evacuate power, yet they were given invoices that it is the country that was delaying them. And finally payments were done to a company that said ready when they were not. And in due course, again, they raised another invoice. Power. Now, my question would be, what is the exit strategy? Like the office that has is given a lot of trust by Kenyans to be able to flag out these anomalies so that they are known as real anomalies. What is your opinion as exit strategy? So, for instance, when as the Office of the Auditor General, you obviously realize that there is some almost an element of criminality in the way these particular contracts were structured, because they were structured with some interest, individuals with some interest. When the Office of the Auditor General flags out a possibility of malpractice in structuring of such contract, you can see the other contracts are different from this particular one, for instance, and you flag it out. What options do we have to deal with people who are hiding under international laws and protection for agreements that have been signed, so that we can say, look, we are going to run away from this particular contract, not because it is our usual business as Kenyans to run, but because there was malpractice in structuring and signing of this particular contract. So maybe you can shed light on some of those few observations.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thank you, Honorable Members. I'll try to address each of the issues raised. The first one, I'll try to address the issues raised by Honorable Arisha. And I would say that the cost of nullification of this contract, the Auditor General has not worked on that. And what I would probably say is that I would put that back to the committee, because the committee needs to commission our team to look at the exit clauses for that, because the nullification will still have its costs, and appraise whether it would make it would be better for us as Kenyans to bear one cost once and for all and exit that. But obviously there is a nullification cost that will be there and should be compared against the life expectancy, the lifespan of those contracts, the remaining life of those contracts. On the issue of the IPP contracts being skewed, I would say this is obvious, and it is very evident by reading that. And that is why I made the comment that they are overprotected and overinsulated, because we are saying that the contracts are in such a way that the risks of not consuming the power are still borne by the consumer. The National Treasury can confirm that. That's why we have the letter of support. And then there is the aspect of the billing in dollars. Yes, all these contracts are billed in dollars, maybe other than this small IPPs, the small hydros, local hydros. And the billing in dollars exposes Kenyans to the fluctuation. And maybe if it is explored to just fix the dollar at a given rate at the point of entering the contract, it may. Of course, I know there will be resistance from the beneficiaries of the same, but we need to reason with them and come up with something that is not exposing the Kenyans, the consumers, constantly. When the dollar rate changes, it doesn't matter whether a citizen who has no role to play in this is involved. They have to be affected by it. In terms of profiling the companies that have high capacity charges, I think it is simple. We have some data, but I would not say it's very comprehensive. But we would get the data from the distribution company. We would present it in any format that will be required, showing the capacity charge paid to each of the IPPs over whichever period. All the distribution company can also provide that. For the Lake Turkana Power, I think that one has cut across because Honorable Arisha asked about it, Honorable Joffrey, and the Honorable Chair. And I would say, if you looked at our submission on page 11, recommendation number 9, it clearly says that further investigation should be carried out to determine any acts of anomaly on individuals involved in the entire process of the project of Lake Turkana weed and action taken on those found culpable. The reason why we put it like that is because Lake Turkana weed power was a privately initiated procurement, which means it is the seller who actually approached the buyer. When the seller approaches the buyer, then the buyer should have the power to negotiate better. So it's only a further investigation to get the initiation of that may possibly enable us to decide, enable the committee to decide on how the contract can be exited. The Auditor General may not want to say that we are the ones taking the responsibility of advising on this, but I would request probably the committee forms a sectoral committee, some understanding the legal perspective of it, others the financial, others operational, so that the decision can be made collectively and advise the committee as appropriate. So that will sort out the Turkana power. Then there is the capacity charge, as asked by Honorable Kingara. My take is that the distribution company is in a position to tell us of the projected energy consumption for the next several years. And on the same, they are able to determine the suppliers or the generators who can adequately supply or meet that energy requirement. In the process, they'll be able to say the state-owned generator that is Kenyan can meet 89%. We only need to have IPPs to meet the differential. And again, my recommendation on that, or our recommendation on that would be, we take the cheapest IPPs to hedge the gap, or to bleach the gap between what the state-owned generation company, which is producing cheap power to us, cannot produce. I think there is the issue of the Turkana weed again in terms of the payments. Honorable Chairman, honorable members, I think it will be the decision of the committee to know how they can deal with the payments that are made against their recommendation. Because if there is a recommendation from the committee, then the payment is made against that, I believe the committee can take an action on the same. Thank you, and I submit.
So Treasury, you see there are issues, and I've also seen an attempt by Treasury to try to make budgets for Parliament. So you will find that there are lots of efforts to sneak some items. Even when the Parliament is pronounced itself, some items keep recurring, we remove them, you still put them again. Then I don't know, is it that some people approach you and tell you if this one is paid, it is good news. I wouldn't want to cast aspersions, but on that particular one, how some of those issues kept coming again, probably we will still need a whole session with the Treasury to make some clarifications. So the other, maybe final one from the Auditor General. Maybe you are the people who understand accounts better. Suppose we were to buy off some of these debts, especially the ones that are in US dollars. So, in view of the dollar rising up every other time. So, for instance, if the country was to buy off the debts, because I think that probably is the only way to convert them into Kenya shillings, so that we are dealing with paying probably the government or another agency locally. If we had done that when the dollar was maybe 70, 80, 100, probably the saving would have been huge. Would it make sense for some of the contracts that we can't exit, probably to consider buying off? Because you see, it's very interesting that we are talking about Kengen, who is we brought Kengen here as a good example to the rest. Kengen is supplying, like you've given figures where they've given, they've supplied 70%, and only gotten what? 70%, and only gotten a very small share, of the payment. The explanation which we keep getting here is the cost of financing, as if we are the ones to finance the developers. I mean, is it really the business of Kenyans to decide for the investor where to get a cheaper cost of financing? And if the cost of financing is cheaper for Kenyan, for instance, then why go for the other ones if they are expensive? Unless maybe somebody who is doing that is an interested party. So this issue of the cost of financing, maybe these are high because the cost of financing was high. Then where do we get the cheaper ones so that we can target the cheaper financing like we have with the Kenyan? And again, also the issue of the term of the contract. It has been argued that some of the IPPs are expensive because they are given a certain period, a lease period. As the Auditor General, maybe have you done some investigations to understand what happens to the equipment? Who owns the equipment once the term has expired? Because we've asked why we pay capacity charge, and we are told we pay capacity charge because this equipment that was installed, say the generators, we are paying for those generators. Meaning that by the end of the capacity charge payment, we are fully paid for those generators. Now, The explanation given by some of the IPPs is that KenGen has already paid for those generators, so they can charge cheaply. The generators more or less should be the same. The question is, what is happening to contracts that have expired? Those generators are available. Why? And why I'm saying this is that we need to have a balance because I'm aware some, say KenGen for instance, some of the generators they've used for a long, long period of time, and they are still working. Now, what is the potential of converting or picking up the generators, because the demand will keep increasing in due course. If we go now to source new power purchase agreements and have new installations for generators and start paying capacity charge again, while the ones that have expired power purchase agreements, we own them completely, we can redeploy because it is our equipment. We redeploy in other areas if that particular area is already connected to the grid maybe and cheaper source of power. Do you have, as the Auditor General, what have you established as the ownership of these assets and the potential of redeploying them so that now we get them and we'll be paying zero capacity charge? And like you said, only 14% accounts to the total payments for installation of generators where there is a capacity charge, meaning that we are dropping, if we were to reuse the equipment, because they rarely have consumed half of their lifetime by the time the contract expires, and we have already bought them. So the question would be, how do we then redeploy this equipment as our own equipment under probably KenGen and end up paying on 14% of the entire amount that we have been paying in the past?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I think so far, based on what we have been provided, I think only 2 plants have been retired. There is a Savo. I think there's one for Kipevu is KenGen, and I think it's being retired now. Yeah, there's Kipevu 3. So, and for those ones, we didn't go to the computation of looking at how they would benefit. But I believe the distributor, the distribution company can work on those figures. Because as it is, I think one of the plants that was retired in Mombasa is still just running but not producing. And let me not say this is with a lot of certainty. There were negotiations that KenGen could take over, which I don't know whether it happened. And as you rightly say, the investor has no use for those plants, basically, because we've already paid them through the risk coverage that we did, and we only need to agree with them. But it also needs to be evaluated to check whether the production costs will be higher than what we'll be having from either hydro or other renewable energy sources. In terms of the terms of the contracts, I think they range between 20 and 25, and most of them are still operational. And the best that would happen is that before any renewal is done, then there should be serious consultation to ensure that the tariffs used are no longer unfavorable, because the investment has already been done and the consumer should not be bearing that investment for the second time. Thank you. I submit.
All right, so thank you very much. Maybe as you do your audits, you also need to give a bit of consideration on this take or pay as opposed to take and pay, and why maybe some of the companies did not succeed to have their PPAs yet signed when they had proposed take and pay, while some were successful with take or pay. Somebody says you only buy, and it's the same technology for wind. We have those who have appeared before us. They had proposals cheaper rate and also getting paid only for what they produce. But then they were not given the green light. It's given to others who are saying you have to buy by force. And even at a higher rate, I think there is some work for you, Auditor General, there, as we also conduct inquiries into all these particular issues. So, honorable members, I think that's it for Treasury and the Auditor General. I think that was very useful. So I want us to have the next presentation. It is brief by Warma. So Warma, like I said, you have proposed 2 shillings, I think, per kilowatt hour. Quite some increment from the original amount, which was in cents per kilowatt hour, to those who generate. Now, there are 2 issues here. We understand you as Warma that you still also have your business and as Warma, and that is your resource in one way or the other. But then it is not a resource to charge like an outrageous figure, because it has a bearing on the final cost of power. As you justify the increment, I wanted you to speak to the issue of cascaded dams. So some of the hydros have the first dam, the second dam, the third dam, which follow one another. Now you have proposed the cost is per kilowatt hour, meaning that if like Kengen, for instance, has 5 dams, you take the first 2 shillings per kilowatt hour from the first dam, the water is released into the next dam, then they generate again, they pay you another 2 shillings. Why is it that you are selling something that you've already sold? Because really, the water you've released from the first dam, it is going to the next one. Would it not be fair to, while it is also true, the company is also making money twice, it's agreeable, but there must be a figure that is agreeable, that does not strain the same issue we are talking about, power cost, and the same time that also allows the Warma to continue doing what it's supposed to do for Kenyans. So I want you to justify those figures and shed some light on what you and these proposals you have. Do you think you are willing to renegotiate those proposals? Because I know they are challenged, and some of the people who are challenging those proposals are also in this room, trying to help us also to reduce the cost of power. So you are 10 minutes or less.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Chair, honorable members, colleagues, all the protocol observed. Good afternoon. Before I proceed, Chair, as you have alluded, we have in these tariffs we are before Court of Law, and the law is very clear that we should not discuss any further until now the case is concluded.
We have given you a report, which is generally, we did not so much dwell on the tariff, but generally how we are working with the KenGen and other institutions.